I love Berserk. It's an amazing franchise about one man's journey to kill his best friend. It's a story of pain and suffering, a tragic tale that's never going to end. And it's a shame, because I think it's a masterpiece that just needs more attention. With that being said, I've just been dying for some Berserk-oriented content, because there's not a lot of it out there. The new anime is garbage, like everyone knows that. It's meme status at this point. The manga, I've read it so many times. It's a quick read. It's just 350 chapters. And I'm not really big on Dynasty Warrior games. I don't know about you, but I find them all to be garbage. They just have really fundamental, basic gameplay. Like, they barely meet the definition of a game. Like, all you do is clear a bunch of meaningless enemies on screen, advance to the next area, rinse and repeat. Like, it's so bad and soulless. You know, speaking of souls, I used Dark Souls to supplement my need for Berserk. And it worked, you know, in a sense. But it's not exactly Berserk, but Dark Souls is better. And get this, right? An entire video game franchise could start and then conclude by the time Berserk could release a few chapters. Like, how sad is that? Like, there's no excuse at this point. Like, Dark Souls started with Demon Souls, you had Dark Souls 1 and 3, and then the franchise is over. What did you do, Kentarō Miura? You released like 10 chapters in that time span. Like, there's no way. Game development is way harder than drawing manga. All you're doing is drawing some pictures. Anyway, I could tangent about that all day, so I'm not going to do it here. I decided to spend my time playing the Berserk Dreamcast game. It's called Sword of the Berserk, Guts Rage. It was released on December 16th, 1999. I played it on emulator through my launch box, and it looks really good for a game released in 1999. Like, comparing it to Silent Hill and Final Fantasy VIII, it just blows them out of the water. It looks like a really good PS2 game on like Dreamcast hardware. Like, that's insane to me. I found out online it's a bit of a cult classic, and at least to me, is canon to the series. The author, Kentarō Miura, wrote the game, the script, everything. And it's definitely a fillery story, but it fits so well in the universe of Berserk, and it's inoffensive. I read some posts online, and most people accept it as canon. The main character is Guts, and he's accompanied by his elf friend Puck, and psychologically broken love Casca. If you're new to the series, you will have no idea who these people are, and you need to read the manga or watch the anime to catch up, because they don't have the time to put backstory. There's not enough space on the disc. So the game begins with Guts and company saving a random girl from slavers. This fight acts as a tutorial and is really easy to get through. Just mash the A button for slightly more vertical swings and B button for overtly horizontal swings. You have other weapons like throwing knives, a repeating crossbow, and grenades, but they all suck. They're all just fucking terrible. You really only care about the arm cannon and health potions. The arm cannon is like a shotgun that just blasts away mook enemies, and it does pretty good damage against bosses. Health potions are exactly what you'd expect them to be. They heal you, but they heal you to full HP, which is really nice, and they can be used when you're on the floor, which is going to be very vital for a certain boss fight. Anywho, they make it to a town and learn about a disease that is turning people into mandragorans, essentially the Flood from Halo. And after killing this girl's boyfriend in the most relaxed boss fight in this game, seriously, all you do is mash A, jump away, mash A, jump away. We find out that this disease is being researched by the town's ruler, who is, okay, let's be mature about this, alright? His name is Balzac. Yeah, they're never going to reference Balzac in the future, which is a shame, because, funny name aside, I think he's a perfectly serviceable villain. This guy who looks evil, smells evil, acts evil, he's evil, he admits that he is the final boss of the game, but we can't take him out here, because then it would be over, right? Anyway, we're going to learn about his deep backstory later, because every villain in Berserk is this tragic guy with an excuse, and it's usually inexcusable anyway. Until then, we meet a resistance group. They essentially tell us that Balzac is evil. Oh, no shit. And more stuff that is obvious to the player. They lead Guts to the source of the Mandragora. You see, there was a young boy there who was about to die of starvation, but he conveniently had a behelit in his hand. It turned him into an apostle, and everything we're seeing is basically the aftermath of that. Consider them his posse, right? And if you're new to the series, a Behelit is an egg-shaped charm that transforms a person into a demon, or in the series they call it an apostle. They only activate under times of great despair and require the user to sacrifice the people closest to them. There are some exceptions to this, but that's generally how they work. There's a nun who guards the boy, and she makes an argument that Mandragorans are people too. Setting aside the fact that they kill a bunch of people. They only cause harm when provoked, which that's complete nonsense. In this game, we've been walking around, and these Mandragorans attack us like immediately without any root cause, right? So I don't know if it's just a quirk of game design or if she's telling the truth. I have no idea. But regardless, we're the guy with the sword, and we have a job to do. We approach the boy, and he's this disgusting Venus flytrap monster. It really does look perfectly suited for the Berserk universe. The nun comes to his aid as a pseudo-apostle, and we just take her out instantly, like 3 quick-time events, and she's dead. And fun fact, the Dreamcast era of games like Shenmue and this, they were what really popularized quick-time events. A lot of people give God of War credit, but this is where it really started. So after arm cannoning the bejesus out of the Venus flytrap arms, we just mash the attack button and jump a few times and we kill him. The nun then remarks that humans are the real demons, and she burns herself alive or something. Before we can truly process what just happened, we are attacked by Nosferatu Zod. Now, Zod is a fan favorite character in the series. He's this giant bull demon that fights for the sake of fighting. He is without a doubt the toughest boss fight in this game, and he's the third guy. And even strategy guides, when I looked this up because I was having a hard time, they just gave me a shrug. They're like, I don't know how to beat him, just figure it out. I just spammed jump slash and used my arm cannon to take him out. It took some luck, but eventually I put him down. I will give the first person $100 to show me footage of a no-hit run on Zod. Just tweet me a link to a YouTube video of you doing it, because that fight was such a pain. Seriously, it was really annoying. Zod has so many attacks, and the game does not prepare you for it at all. You have to learn by dying. He stabs you with his horn, swats you away. He can already stab you with his horn and throw you on the floor, but to add insult to injury, he can just grab you with his hand and pile drive you. He's got these 360-degree tail swings, and he can just jump in the air and crush you. It's nuts. It's like he's from a different game. I'd imagine him being a mid-level boss in Dark Souls. And you know what? Taking a step back, I think he actually reminds me of the Cleric Beast from Bloodborne. He grabs you, throws you, jumps. He's like the Cleric Beast, making this game really ahead of its time. This fight was truly impressive. And beating him gave me that satisfaction of being yeah, I just took out a really big monster. That's awesome. You defeat Zod, or it really just ends in a draw. He then leaves, and the curse of the Mandragora is lifted. The town people are returned back to normal, but so do all the people you killed in the game. Guts, the player character, you killed someone's father, mother, child, and so on. And without needing to explain himself, Guts just leaves. We are now after Balzac. He needs to pay for allowing this disease to continue on for as long as it did. We make our way back to his castle through a barrage of knights. I don't even know how to describe it. Barrage, large quantity. What's the proper phrasing for just too many enemies? Because it's just nonsense. There are so many enemies to kill, and it's just not fun. There's especially these halberd enemies that you're never prepared for. What they do is they spin their little stick and they clip you and stagger you, and it's because Guts has no poise. He's got none of that poise, man. So after a grueling slog, and I mean it really is grueling, and at this point, I just abused the revive mechanic. You have infinite continues and your equipment gets refilled. So anyway, we make our way to Balzac's door. We have a mini boss fight in the form of an old man with a crossbow. Really impressive, right? He's got a lot of HP, but I've got Berserk mode, so he just dies. Now to Balzac. Remember when I said Balzac here had a deep backstory? Well, here we go. He became evil because being a ruler and a husband is hard work. Juggling those two responsibilities just became too much to handle. Thus he became evil. That's really all there is to it. He couldn't find a good work-life balance. He uses like fanciful imagery to excuse his actions, and he tries to make it seem like a bigger deal than it is. But it's really that simple. It was like snow piling up, and the burden became too much to bear. Dude, aren't you like a king or a baron or a duke or something? Just hire some people to help you out, man. I feel like villains need some good reason to go evil. Like, let's take Griffith, for example. He was tortured for an entire year. He was starved, beaten, slashed, had his tongue ripped out, and was castrated. And while I don't justify anything about the eclipse, because Griffith is an unforgivable monster, you can at least understand why he went evil, right? Like, it makes sense. Back to the game, though, because if I talk about Griffith, I'll be going on for an hour about him. So, continuing on, there's also this thing about Balzac's wife having a disease and him having to use the Mandragora to keep her young and healthy. There might be some guilt in there too because the Mandragora made her lose her mind. But it doesn't matter because Balzac is evil. The game really wants to force in the idea that Balzac and Guts are similar. They both are burdened to take care of their loved one who lost their sanity. But Guts is a good person who perseveres, whereas Balzac allowed himself to fall into despair. Balzac doubles down on his belief that he was overworked. He transforms into a gray monster who no longer suffers from kyphosis, and we need to take him out. I was thinking of like suiciding here and just using my arm cannon, but I don't know, just flailing around worked and it killed him. I was just so done with fighting Zod that after him, the bosses just flop. Balzac has a piercing attack and okay range. He's got like a neat dash mechanic that gives an after image. Like, it's a neat effect, but the fight sucked. After defeating him, we have to fight this giant baby thing that has Casca. Like, just ew, look at this. I have no clue what it is, but I just killed it. But now we have a scene that is truly the reason I want this game to be canon. Casca gets to become herself for a fleeting moment. I'll play the scene uninterrupted.
Casca, Casca, hang in there, my love.
Gatsu?
Casca, you know who I am.
Gatsu. My dear, I was dreaming. A really bad dream.
Casca.
Guts.
Casca. 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 My love, come back.
She went back to normal because she was possessed by the Mandragora. It makes sane people crazy, but crazy people sane.
Poor Gatsu. So close.
If you're a fan of the series, this one scene was a small glimpse of hope until falling back into the pit of despair that is Berserk. After that heart-tugging scene, we now have our final battle against Balzac. He uses his Beelhit to call upon the God Hand. He sacrifices his wife and becomes this disgusting demon. I feel he's a bit over-designed in comparison to other apostles. Again, he's very fillery. We take him out without a problem. You just sort of hug his yellow face and mash the A button. The game then hard cuts to the conclusion. We see the cast walking away from the castle, and it's shown that humanity is still pretty scummy. Are humans the real problem? Our heroes then walk off to their next adventure with that question in mind. And that was the game. It wasn't a half-bad arc, and it wasn't a half-bad game. I will say that there is dramatic tension in the story, and there's a lot of undertones that will resonate with you if you're a fan of the series. The story uses the demonic disease as a metaphor for discrimination. You see, humans despise these monsters out of fear, even though the Mandragora are peaceful. Again, I'm going to argue that because they were totally not peaceful. They attacked us every single time we arrived. But again, maybe a quirk of game design. It's supposed to have the audience question who the real monsters are, and if being human is any different than being a demon, a theme that is reintroduced time and time again in the source material. I still recall the scene in the anime where Griffith questions if there's truly a difference between God and devils. Ultimately, it's for audience interpretation. Me, I see Berserk as a quest to fight against the abyss, no matter the cause, because that's what makes you better than evil. Speaking of source material, the game assumes you have watched the anime, but at the same time doesn't require you to. It strikes an odd balance in that regard. The game is simply one arc of the manga put into game form. Taking a step back, I wanted to put myself in the shoes of someone new to the series. I think if I was completely ignorant to Berserk, I would come away asking questions about the franchise, which is a good thing. I would be interested in reading the manga or watching the anime, and because Berserk is so good, I'd get hooked. Now, from the perspective of a long-standing fan, I just appreciated the added content. God knows we could use more Berserk. A major issue I had with the game was that it was too short. It's about 2.5 hours long with about 1 hour of gameplay. And that's being generous. I believe most of the disk space was used for cutscenes, which is kind of a shame. The game is well developed. I mean, it's really hard to mess up an arcade beat 'em up. You're supposed to defeat all the enemies to advance the next stage. It's just like Fighting Force, which was also published by Eidos. Small world. Anyway, there's no real exploits that I could find that would ruin the game, aside from running past all the enemies on certain stages. Okay, that's a major oversight. But in this game's defense, you can't glitch through the floor or do some fancy Ocarina of Time glitches to get to the final area. But, looking at speedruns.com, if the game is played efficiently, it's only 20 minutes long. Another complaint I had was that your sword is so damn big you can't actually enjoy it. The devs made most areas too narrow, so your sword just kind of bonks off everything. I appreciate this for the sense of realism it gives, but the game forces you to use punches, and that just sucks. When you punch an enemy, they fall down, they get a few iframes, and then you need to punch them again. To alleviate this, you can jump slash, because it's a vertical hit, but at that point, it feels like you're just not having fun. Like, you're doing something to cheese the game, right? Like, rather than play as intended, because intended play was using your fists, but punching sucks. It just does. Some areas do open up for swordplay, but for a game which shows this massive behemoth of a weapon as the star attraction, it's really a shame you just can't enjoy it.
An outcast warrior enters a land plagued by an evil fate. He is not like ordinary men, for he carries the Dragon Slayer, a mighty blade of retribution, whose fury knows no equal. His enemies will know true fear once he starts to swing.
Doesn't that intro just get you hyped to use this thing? Well, sadly, you're gonna have a weird time hitting enemies. When you finally do get the time to use it, it's oddly satisfying. The Dragon Slayer has this very nice explosion sound effect when it hits enemies. It's so much better than the clang in the 2016 anime. Like, I swear to God, it's so much better. That goes into another complaint I have with this game, and this one is minor: the audio direction. I didn't play with headphones, but I can tell you that with surround sound speakers, or just speakers in general, the game has horrible audio levels. The sound effect of your sword is the loudest thing in the game, and when cutscenes are playing, you really need to jack up your audio, so you have to have your hand on your audio slider all the time, and it's so annoying. This should be a very basic thing in every video game, is the ability to change the master audio, the background music audio, the sound effect audio, and the voice line audio. It's such an easy fix. When I play video games, I usually set master volume to 100%. I put background music down to 50. I keep voice at 100, and I keep sound effects at 75%. I think that's a nice balance of how you should tweak audio. The game overall is okay, but I feel like it really needed some polish. Certain characters have a good amount of detail, while others are a blank face. The boss fights, in my opinion, are the best part of the game, but the controls don't give you the tools to deal with them appropriately. For example, when the boss performs their very obvious telegraphed attack, Guts will get stuck in his animation, and mashing the jump button or dodge button, it takes a few seconds longer for the game to respond. Maybe this is because I've been playing way too much Dark Souls, and I've been spoiled by good controls, but it's kind of annoying. I feel like the added weapons were nice. I especially like the arm cannon, it did a lot of damage. And because the game doesn't punish death, you can suicide to get your items restocked. But the other ones just were awful. I only kind of used the spiked bombs just to try them out, and the other weapons, like the ranged weapons, they were good for cheesing the dumb AI. Speaking of dumb AI, I hated these crossbow knights. They just ran away, and that's all they ever did. I found using a throwing knife and then following up with like a sword swing was the best way to deal with them. But seriously, they are such cowards. I feel like the developers program them to be a set distance away, so when you walk towards them, they don't become a threat anymore. It should have been a certain amount of time that they get tired, because you really are just chasing them through the map, and it's just nonsense. The game does have a decent variety of enemies too, from big brutes to knights, assassins, and of course the demonic monstrosities of the Mandragora, but they all have like the same effect on our hero, and that's just being a roadblock. The Dragon Slayer is this awesome weapon, and it should just be able to cleave through enemies like butter, but it just doesn't. Even the most basic enemy requires 3 hits to kill on the easiest difficulty, which I just think is shameful. Maybe I'm weird for saying this, but when I see a giant sword, I expect the thing to just kill shit. With Guts being able to swing this thing so easily, it makes me think that this giant slab of raw iron is actually made of helium. The only time in this game you feel like a true godless killing machine is when you go into Berserk mode and the game ignores collision detection. You start ripping through people and it's simply glorious. The way you build up this gauge is either getting kills or getting killed. It's sad that way. You go through a few locales, which is nice. They range from desert plains to a peasant city. You have a forest area, and then you got a castle. There's nothing really to find in any of them aside from ammunition, but I appreciate the variety. Boss fights were pretty impressive for their time. The first boss fight, not so much, but when you get to fight Zod, you gotta like dodge his horns, spam jump slash. There's a lot to Zod if you actually just are looking at the footage. Balzac, I don't know, he had an interesting dash mechanic, and it sort of felt like a duel, but yeah, his evolved form was just awful. Like, all I had to do was just get right up to him and hit him. But he had a neat mechanic of sucking in guts to get a close range attack. Like, there's creativity in these boss fights, but I feel like they had to add more mechanics and more details to make them even better. I love boss fights in video games. It's easily the highlight of them. So me asking you for more isn't necessarily a complaint, just a wish. The most significant thing in this game, at least for me, was Casca getting her sanity back for a few seconds. She acknowledges Guts, stating that she was having a horrible dream until quickly reverting back to a vegetable. Until the most recent chapters, which have her return to normal, and it was literally like late 2019 that happened. This, for the most part, and this was in 1999, this was the only form of closure fans got for like the longest time. even if it was for a fleeting moment. My overall thoughts on this game was that it was okay. It's the statement I kept saying when I played this game. It's not a bad game, and I'm sure at the time of its release, it was top class. It was God of War before God of War was the thing, and it honestly had some good boss fights. I found the combat to be a bit lacking due to the environments blocking your sword swings, but there was a clear answer for that. Punching, but punching sucks. The game is a really short romp in the Berserk universe, and it wasn't a bad romp. They decided to make an arc into a video game and succeeded on that. But one arc is not a fulfilling amount of content. Overall, I give this game a 6 out of 10. I think it's a fair score. I just wanted more stuff to do. Well, thank you everyone for watching this review of Sword of the Berserk, Guts Rage. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, it makes me feel good about myself. I do read all the comments, even the mean ones, so please type something down. That being said, have a great day. Alright, so here are some of my extended thoughts on, not necessarily the game, but how I think about game reviewing in general. For those who are wondering how I review games, it's really on a nebulous how I feel about its score system. I start at 5 because that's average, and then the score moves up or down relative to how much good or how much bad is in the game. I find it really rare to see polarizing things in games that average it to a 5. Like, imagine a game had really good gameplay, but it had really bad music and graphics and literally everything else, and somehow that averages it to a 5. That doesn't usually happen. 5s are really just bland experiences. They are the average. If there's enough flaws in a game, it drops down to a 4. So like, for example, Fallout 4 is a 4. It has glitches, an asinine story, and meaningless dialogue choices, but the environments and the gameplay, like all of that is pretty solid. Like there's a good game in there, but there's things holding it back. Now for a game that's a 10, that would be something that achieves everything it's seeking to achieve and is an example of what to strive for. I don't believe we have a gaming equivalent to the Criterion Collection, but we definitely should. An example of a 10 out of 10 would be like Pikmin 2. It's a game that expands on the original idea, it adds more content, more fair difficulty, timeless graphics, and there's this sense of, like, there's a rewarding sense of exploration and time management. And it's just fun. Like, it's just fun, alright? So, essentially, a 10 out of 10 is a game that's so good that any complaint would be a nitpick. Like, Red Pikmin nose is stupid. 9 out of 10 would not play again. Like that's not a real criticism. That's stupid. So here's a general scale of how I review games, an example game, and the general like takeaway. The video is really just a way to show you how I arrive to a score. So 1 out of 10 games are like fundamentally garbage, like Action 52, 76. Like they are games that are broken, that they don't work, and you could say there's a good game under there, but you should have tried making that the forefront. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. 2, really bad, but it at least is functional, kinda, like Platoon or Superman 64 or Sonic 06. Like you could beat these games, but why would you? They're just not fun to play through. They're glitchy messes, you have to kind of play in the game to make it work. And, you know, there was an attempt, but it just fell on its face. 3, bad, but I feel like it's just such low effort. Games like Ninja Breadman, 2 Worlds, there's a bunch of games that are just 3s that are on my shelf right now. Like they're games that are like, they were made for the intent of just being pack filler. Like that's what a 3 is. Like this just sucks. Like it's boring and bad. Let's see, number 4, like 4 out of 10s. Below average, needs improvement, I see potential. Games like Fallout 4, Bugs Life, Duke Nukem Forever, like these games, I can see that there is something good in there, but the way in which you play through it, it could have been so much better. 5, well, it was a whole lot of nothing, really bland experience. Games like Viva Pinata, or really any sports and racing games. Like, if I play a game and I'm just like, that was kind of a game, like, I give it a 5. Like, for the longest time, Animal Crossing got a 5, but that's kind of a weird exception to the rule. When you play Animal Crossing, like how it's meant to be played, like 30 minutes a day, it slowly creeps up to a 6 or 7, and to some people it hits a 10. Like, it's crazy to me. But 5s are just boring. They're inoffensive. Like, I'm looking at my collection right now, and I'm just trying to think of something like the Family Guy video game. Like, that was an okay game. It wasn't amazing, but it was a game. 6. That was okay. Could have been better. This is the weird part. Like, if I find some good stuff about a game, like if I have a good chuckle, or I'm like, this was kind of fun, it gets a 6. Like No Man's Sky. Like, No Man's Sky on a release was like a 3. Like, it was a bad game. And then it slowly got more content, and then it became, it's kind of bland. But then there's some fun stuff. Like, ultimately, I think, going around places and enjoying the world is kind of fun. Tulip, Dead to Rights, Borderlands. Like, these games are just, they're okay. They're fine. I wouldn't consider them bad. So, like, this game isn't a bad game, therefore it's okay. 6. 7. Good. Just good. I had fun. Those are the phrases that I say when I play a game that's a 7. Like Sonic Heroes, Metal Slug, a lot of RPGs, like, but I chose Mega Man X Command Mission as an example. Like, it's good. It's a good game. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's good. It's one of those, like, I just have a general, it was okay. It's good. It's better than okay, but it's good. 8. This is great. Man, I wish they did this to make it better, XYZ. This is my childhood, nostalgia, blah, blah, blah. Like, these are your Crash Bandicoots, your Spyros, or Little Big Planet. Like, these are games that are really good. And really good is better than good, so it's an 8, right? Like, these are games that have a lot of polish to them, but you could be like, I'd tweak it a little bit more. Like, the original Crash Bandicoot's an 8, but Crash Bandicoot 2 is like a 9 or a 10. Like, it's really good. It's way better. It fixes all the problems and gives you more features and is ultimately a better product. Speaking of which, 9s. These are absolutely amazing. They're near perfect. Just one blemish. Now, a blemish has to be something that's really noticeable. So, like, my examples would be like League of Legends. It's a multiplayer game. It's only multiplayer. It doesn't have teaching tools, but that might be too much of a nitpick. But, like, it has a horrible, toxic fan base. You can't really control the algorithm that sets you up in your elo, and it's a constantly shifting equilibrium. Now, that is a subjective amount of criticism towards it, but the base game, like, when you actually play it, it's really fun and addicting. But there are flaws with it, and a lot of them aren't really related to the game. Like the RNG with the dragons, that's not a problem, honestly, but it's a lot of things you can't control, and I think that's kind of the inherent problem with multiplayer games. And I think that's the one blemish that knocks it down to a 9. If you want to say League of Legends is a 10 out of 10 game, go ahead. But I think if I can find something that truly does bug me, but everything else, like, is so good, it's a 9. Other examples would be Okami. The start of that game is so slow, boring, and laborious, but it really picks up and it becomes a classic. Luigi's Mansion, I don't know, like, the controls just felt off for me. It was really weird to explain, but I never felt like the controls in Luigi's Mansion ever felt natural. There's also the aiming mechanic, and it's just, it wasn't as realized as I would like it to be, but it's practically perfect. It's near perfect. And I guess I should just go to 10 out of 10 right here. 10 out of 10 is perfect. This is what games should strive to be. So usually sequels fix things. Not always. Sometimes the first is the best. So, like, Dark Souls is a perfect game, and so is Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 2 is like a 7, in my opinion. It really does take a step down. 7 or 8. I'm being generous and saying 8. But yeah, Dark Souls, the original one, it's got the interconnected world. It's got the variety of ways you can tackle the game. You can go dual wield, two-handed weapon, just roll through attacks. You can go shield and just block everything. You could be a parry god. It doesn't matter. You can choose however you want to play the game. Whereas games like DS2, like you can do that, but you're just gonna have to grind souls, and the world's not that realized. It's very randomized in my opinion. But yeah, everyone in the world says Dark Souls is a masterpiece, and it's fun. And honestly, like, if you want to call it a 9, you can. You can say the Witch of Izalith fight was just kind of nonsense. So you could say that it's a 9 or a 10, but I didn't find it a problem. Like, I beat that thing and I thought it was thematically interesting. Monster Hunter World, you know, you could say the multiplayer is a blemish with it, but ultimately you can solo the game, and I love the game. It's perfect in my eyes. Pikmin 2, you can say the micromanagement is stupid and there's not enough time in the day, but I thought it was perfect. Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Okay, no one's gonna argue that. Okay, no one. Most Zelda games get 10 out of 10 because of the brand, right? It's like Apple. You know, you don't insult Apple, right? Just like you don't insult Zelda. You know, it's like legacy. But for the most part, that's kind of how I judge games. Now, any of these could change up and down depending on what I'm playing recently, but ultimately, this is how I review games. So in the future, you know, just watch out for that. So with that being said, have a great day. Hope you like my explanation.